The morning had started with thunder, no warning, no build-up, just a sharp crack across the sky that startled Jason Sterling awake. The storm outside his penthouse windows rattled the glass, and for the first time in a decade, his daily routine was knocked off balance. The power had flickered once, twice, then gone dark completely. The smart blinds stayed shut, the shower cold, and the voice assistant he relied on for news and calendar updates gave nothing but silence. Jason Sterling was not the kind of man who appreciated unpredictability. He was the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech conglomerate, a man whose days were built on precision, order, and ruthless efficiency. His suits were tailored to the millimeter. His meetings were never late. His breakfast, when he didn't skip it, was measured by macros and delivered by a private chef. He had built his empire brick by calculated brick, rising from a foster care background he rarely spoke about. Everything about his life now screamed control, power, and insulation from the messiness of the world below his penthouse floor. But on this gray-skied morning, none of that control mattered. His chauffeur was caught in a pileup on the freeway. His assistant hadn't answered her phone. The elevators in his high-rise were temporarily offline, and the backup generator only powered hallway lights. For the first time in 15 years, Jason took the stairs. He actually walked, through 3 city blocks to find coffee. Not the imported artisan roast he typically drank, not the blend that cost more per cup than most people made in an hour. Just coffee, any coffee. The city was still waking up, damp from rain, the sidewalks shining like glass. He passed shuttered businesses and early risers wrapped in jackets. He ignored the occasional good morning from passersby, too focused on scanning building signs for any cafe that might be open. Then he spotted it, a tiny place squeezed between a laundromat and a used bookstore. A battered blue awning hung above the fog-up windows, and a crooked sign in the door read, "Open." He almost kept walking. It wasn't his kind of place, too ordinary, too unrefined. But the craving for caffeine and the hum in his temples urged him inside. The bell over the door jingled, and warm air wrapped around him, thick with the scent of cinnamon, vanilla, and fresh espresso. It wasn't busy. A few people hunched over laptops or newspapers. A barista worked behind the counter with practiced ease, humming softly to a classic rock tune playing from an old radio. Jason's polished shoes tapped lightly on the worn wood floors as he made his way to the register, already reaching for his phone to check his calendar. That's when he heard it. Not a sound he expected in a quiet cafe, but a sudden burst of laughter, light, musical, unfiltered joy. He turned his head. In the far corner, seated at a small round table, were 3 little girls, maybe 7 years old. All of them wore paper birthday hats, bright colors, crimped edges, and slightly crumpled from wear. They were dressed in modest clothes, slightly oversized jackets, mismatched socks. But they were radiant. They looked like joy personified. On their table was a single muffin, blueberry from the looks of it, sliced into 3 careful portions. A small plastic knife rested on a napkin beside it. A shared bottle of water sat in the middle, and one of the girls was painstakingly pouring it into 3 small paper cups. They tapped the sides of their cups together in a toast before pretending to take a sip, their eyes sparkling with amusement. Jason blinked, unsure why the scene struck him the way it did. But it did, hard. He tried to turn away. He was not someone who got caught up in the moment. Emotions were liabilities, distractions. Still, something in his chest tightened when he saw one of the girls reach into her backpack and pull out a small hand-drawn card with the words, "Happy birthday to us," written in purple crayon. A woman, presumably a waitress, approached the girls' table with a soft smile and a note of regret in her voice. "I'm sorry, girls," she said gently, "but unless you have a few more dollars, I can't bring out the cake. Maybe next time, okay?" The girls didn't cry. They didn't complain. One of them, her brown curls tied up with a shoelace, grinned and said cheerfully, It's okay. We'll blow out invisible candles. We're really good at pretending. Jason stood there, unmoving. Something inside him, something that had been dormant, locked behind years of wealth and detachment, cracked open. It was small at first, like a whisper, a flicker. But it grew louder with every breath he took. He didn't know why. He didn't understand it. But he was walking toward them before his brain had given him permission. "Excuse me," he said, his voice quieter than it had been in years. All three girls turned to look at him, wide-eyed curious. "Is it your birthday today?" The one with the curls nodded eagerly. "All of us. We're triplets," she declared. "We're 7 today." 7, he repeated, as if the number itself held weight. "And you're celebrating with?" He glanced at the table. A muffin. The smallest of the three, the quietest one, offered a proud smile. "It's blueberry. It's our favorite." Jason felt his throat tighten. He hadn't celebrated his 7th birthday. Not really. He remembered a foster home. A cracked plastic plate with a sandwich on it. No candles. No cake. Just a caseworker's apology and an envelope with the wrong name written in marker. He had buried that memory deep, under degrees, achievements, and quarterly profits. But here it was again, surfacing, taking shape in the faces of 3 girls he'd never met. "Would it be okay," he said carefully, "if I bought you all a real cake?" The girls looked at one another, then at him. One whispered, "Are you a magician?" Jason laughed, a real, soft laugh. "No, just someone who was late for something important." He looked at the waitress, who had been watching in silence. "Whatever cake you have, the biggest one, please." She nodded, her eyes a little glassy. Jason sat down at the table with the girls, forgetting entirely about his phone, his schedule, and the buzzing in his coat pocket. The girls giggled, moved their crayon drawings aside, and introduced themselves. Mia, Leela, and June. They told him about their school, about their mom who was working a double shift today and couldn't take them out, about how they practiced singing Happy Birthday in 3-part harmony. And all the while, Jason listened, not like a CEO, but like a man hearing something sacred for the first time in years. When the cake arrived, a towering cream-filled chocolate masterpiece with 7 bright candles, the girls gasped like they were seeing a miracle. One of them reached out, touching the frosting like it was made of gold. Jason felt a lump in his throat he couldn't swallow. They let him help light the candles. One by one, he handed each girl the lighter, holding his breath while their small fingers steadied the flame. Then they all closed their eyes, made wishes, and blew out the candles in a whoosh of air that seemed to carry something invisible into the world. The cafe clapped. Strangers smiled. And Jason Sterling, a man who had spent years building walls around his heart, sat back and realized that his life, his entire, meticulously built life, might never be the same again. And the girls, they simply laughed, ate cake, wiped frosting from each other's noses. They didn't know they had just changed something in him. Something big. They were just being kids, celebrating the only way they knew how. And for the first time in a long, long while, Jason realized he didn't want to leave. Jason didn't remember walking back to his penthouse. He must have taken the same route, past the bookstore, the laundromat, the puddles reflecting city lights. But everything blurred behind the laughter of those 3 little girls. He barely noticed the cold drizzle that had begun again, or the ache in his perfectly polished shoes. He entered the silent stillness of his penthouse with a kind of disorientation he hadn't felt in years. The marble floors greeted him like always, cold and gleaming. The floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the skyline like a museum painting. His assistant had left his schedule printed on the granite kitchen island, perfectly timed blocks of meetings, calls, and negotiations highlighted in blue. But Jason didn't look at it. He stood there, motionless, still hearing the whisper of a small voice say, "We're really good at pretending." He poured himself a glass of scotch, something he rarely did in the middle of the day. but it just sat in his hand. Instead, he walked to the couch and sat down in complete silence. He stared out the window but didn't see the skyline. He saw 3 sets of bright eyes, a single muffin split 3 ways, a birthday card drawn with crayon and joy. He should have forgotten it already. It should have been nothing more than a brief, odd moment in an otherwise forgettable day. But something had taken root in him. Jason Sterling was not a sentimental man. He didn't believe in fate or signs or the universe sending messages. He believed in data, in numbers, in results. But none of those things could explain why his chest still felt cracked open like a broken eggshell. He thought of their mom. The girls had mentioned her in passing. "She's working at the hospital again today," one of them had said proudly. "She always says love is in what you do, not what you buy." He didn't ask more. He hadn't wanted to pry. But now he wished he had. That night, Jason barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the flicker of birthday candles, heard the soft harmony of 3 girls singing to themselves, felt that strange, foreign sensation of warmth. He didn't like not understanding himself. It unnerved him. So the next morning, before his driver even arrived, Jason walked. He went back to the cafe. The same barista from yesterday gave him a surprised smile. "Back so soon?" He cleared his throat. "I was hoping to ask about the girls from yesterday. The triplets." She raised her eyebrows. "Mia, Leela, and June." He nodded. "Do they come here often?" The barista leaned against the counter, folding her arms. "Their mom works double shifts at the hospital. They stop by after school sometimes to wait for her. We try to make them feel welcome. They're good kids, real sweet." Jason hesitated, then asked the question that had been clawing at him since yesterday. "Do you know where they live?" The barista studied him for a long moment. Then, instead of answering, she reached below the counter and pulled out a folded napkin. "They drew this yesterday, said it was for the cake man in case he came back." Jason opened it slowly. There were 3 stick figures, him and the 3 girls, surrounding a giant birthday cake with 7 candles. Written in looping, colorful letters were the words, "Thank you for making our birthday real." He stared at it for a long time. Something in him quivered. Something old and buried. "I don't know exactly where they live," the barista said gently, "but I know they're staying at the transitional housing shelter on 9th. Their mom's name is Elena. She's been through a lot." Jason didn't speak. He just nodded once, folded the napkin with careful precision, and left. The shelter on 9th wasn't far. An old brick building with fading paint and a rusty ramp. The lobby was small and smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. A tired-looking woman at the front desk glanced up as he approached. "I'm looking for Elena," he said. "She has 3 daughters, triplets." The woman eyed him cautiously. "May I ask who's asking?" He realized then how strange this must look. An expensive coat, shine shoes, silk scarf. He didn't look like someone who belonged here. "My name is Jason Sterling. I met her daughters yesterday." The woman tilted her head. "The cake." He blinked. "Yes." She gave him a look of weary amusement. "Wait here." A few minutes later, a woman emerged from a side hallway, wiping her hands on a rag. She was slim, with tired eyes and long brown hair pulled into a bun. Her uniform was plain. Scrubs from the hospital, wrinkled and slightly stained. But her presence was steady, strong. She approached cautiously, and Jason stood to meet her. "You're the one who bought them the cake," she said softly. Not a question, just an observation. "Yes. I didn't get a chance to say thank you." Her voice was warm but guarded. "They talked about it all night. Said you were magic." Jason smiled faintly. "I don't know about that. I just happened to be there." There was a moment of silence. She studied him, probably trying to figure out what he wanted. He couldn't blame her. "I hope I'm not overstepping," he said, "but I haven't been able to stop thinking about them. About you." She raised her eyebrows slightly. "I know I'm a stranger," he continued, "and I don't want to make this awkward. But when I saw them, how happy they were with so little, I felt ashamed." Elena's expression softened just slightly. "You don't have to feel ashamed. That was their real birthday. You gave them something I couldn't. And they'll remember it forever." Jason looked down for a moment, collecting his thoughts. "I spent years building a world where things like this couldn't touch me. Money, status, power. But yesterday, those girls reminded me what it felt like to be small, and I remembered that I hated birthdays too." She tilted her head. "Why?" "I was in the system," he admitted. "Foster care. There was one birthday where they forgot I even existed. I sat in a room with a cold sandwich and a candle from a drawer. No singing, no card, just silence." Elena's eyes glistened, but she didn't speak. Jason cleared his throat. "I made a promise to myself that I'd never be forgotten again. I worked, I climbed, I won. But somewhere along the way, I forgot what kindness looked like. Your daughters reminded me." Elena sat down across from him. "They've had to learn how to make joy out of scraps," she said. "We lost their dad 3 years ago. Medical bills buried us. I was a teacher before, but I couldn't make ends meet. Now I clean hospital rooms, work nights, and I try my best to keep them smiling." Jason swallowed hard. "You're an incredible mother." She looked down. "Some days I feel like I'm barely holding things together." A silence settled between them, deep, understanding, and heavy with unspoken truths. Then, finally, Jason said, "I want to help. I don't mean charity. I mean real help. Opportunities. Support. Maybe even something bigger." Elena looked at him with a cautious hope. "Why?" He smiled, but it was faint. "Because I think I was meant to walk into that cafe yesterday. Because they made me remember something important. And because I don't want to just build companies anymore. I want to build something that actually matters." She didn't say anything for a long moment, just nodded slowly. "Then let's see what that something could be." And just like that, a door opened. Not one made of wood or steel or business deals, but one made of second chances, fragile trust, and the healing power of being seen. Jason didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But he knew this. He would never forget their names again. Not Mia. Not Leela. Not June. And certainly not the woman whose quiet strength had stirred a heart he thought was long frozen. Jason stood at the edge of something unfamiliar, like the first step off a cliff without knowing if a parachute would open. He had sat in boardrooms where billions were at stake and hadn't flinched. He'd fired people with the calm of a surgeon. But when it came to calling Elena the next morning, just to check in, maybe ask how the girls were doing, his hands trembled like a boy before his first recital. He didn't understand it. This wasn't a business deal. There were no spreadsheets to analyze, no terms to negotiate. This was real, raw, human. And that made it so much harder. When he finally picked up the phone, his voice cracked on the first word. "Hi, Elena. I hope I'm not interrupting anything." She laughed softly on the other end. "You say that like you didn't change the course of my daughter's whole year." Jason smiled, pacing the wide glass hallway of his office. I've been thinking about what you said, about the girls, and I'd like to do something more, if you're open to it." He could hear the hesitation in her silence. "Not as a favor," he added quickly. "Not as a handout. I just feel like I can't go back to the way things were. Not now." There was a long pause. Then softly, "What did you have in mind?" Jason took a deep breath. "Let's start small. Maybe I can spend time with the girls, get to know them. Maybe help them with school, buy them some books, or, I don't know. I just don't want that cafe birthday to be the only good memory they get from someone like me." Elena's voice came through warm and steady. "They would love that." And so, the next day, Jason Sterling CEO, investor, power broker, sat cross-legged on the floor of a shelter's rec room, helping three giggling girls tape together a cardboard puppet theater. He wasn't sure how it had happened. One moment he was showing them how to fold the cardboard. The next, he was cast as Sir Muffin Man, the villain who had stolen the birthday candles. June played the brave knight. Mia was the magical talking cat. Leela handled the special effects with a flashlight and glitter. Jason laughed more in 1 hour than he had in the past 5 years. But even in the joy, he noticed things. He noticed that their shoes were worn, that their coats didn't close properly against the wind, that when snack time came, the girls waited until everyone else had gone before reaching for a cookie, like they were used to going last, like they didn't want to seem greedy, like they knew what it meant to do without. Afterwards, while the girls played tag with other children, Jason pulled Elena aside. "I don't want to overstep," he said, "but they need more than books and cake. They need stability, safety, opportunity." Elena nodded slowly. "I know, but right now I'm just trying to keep our heads above water." "What if I helped you get a better job?" he asked. "You mentioned you used to teach. What happened?" "I had to leave after my husband passed," she said quietly. "The hospital job pays more per hour, especially with night shifts. But it's hard. I miss teaching." Jason thought for a moment. "What if I fund a program at a local school? Something small, focused on literacy. And you run it?" Her eyes widened. "You'd do that?" "I would, but only if you want it. This isn't pity, Elena. It's respect. I see the kind of mother you are, and I think other kids could use someone like you too." She covered her mouth for a moment, blinking away tears. "You don't know what this means. I used to dream about starting something like that. I gave up on that dream a long time ago." "Then let's bring it back," he said simply. A week later, Jason met with the principal of a struggling inner-city elementary school. He had done his research, handpicked the right people, and drafted a plan for a small, after-school enrichment program focused on reading and emotional wellness. He named it Project Birthday Candle, in honor of 3 little girls who reminded him that even one spark could light up a room. Elena came on board as the program's coordinator. She was nervous at first, unsure if she still had what it took. But the moment she stood in front of those students again, something clicked. Her voice was strong. Her passion returned. And the children listened. Jason watched her from the back of the room during that first session. The way she crouched beside a shy boy struggling with his letters. The way she encouraged a group of girls to share stories about what made them feel brave. It was like watching a flower open in slow motion. Quiet, powerful, and inevitable. After class, he found her in the hallway, straightening the chairs. "You were amazing," he said. She turned, flushed and breathless. "I forgot how much I loved this." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and handed her a small folded napkin. The same one the girls had drawn on. She gasped. "You kept it." "I've read it every morning," he said. "It reminds me why I'm doing this." Elena looked up at him, her eyes shining. "You didn't have to. You've done more than enough." Jason shook his head. "I think I needed this more than they did. You showed me something I forgot." "What's that?" He smiled. "That money can build things, but kindness, that builds people." As spring unfolded, so did the impact of the program. Children who had once struggled began to read out loud with confidence. Parents started volunteering. Teachers noticed a shift, not just in academic performance, but in the spirit of the school itself. Word spread. Local news outlets picked up the story. Millionaire CEO launches literacy program after chance encounter with triplets in cafe. The story went viral. But Jason refused interviews. It wasn't about publicity. It was about redemption, healing, connection. And every Friday, like clockwork, he brought a new book to the girls. Maya loved adventure stories, June liked mysteries, and Leela had a growing obsession with space. They started calling him Uncle Jay. He never corrected them. Then one Friday, he arrived at the shelter and found only Elena waiting by the door, her expression anxious. "What's wrong?" he asked. She hesitated, then said, "A man came by today. Said he was their father's cousin. Claimed he has a legal claim to custody." Jason's chest tightened. "But he's never been around." "He's not safe," Elena said. "I know that. But if he pushes this legally, I could lose them." Jason looked at her, the weight of the moment sinking in. He had stepped into their world without knowing what it would cost. Now, he might be the only one who could protect them. And for the first time in years, Jason Sterling knew exactly what he needed to do. Jason didn't sleep that night. His penthouse, once a symbol of success and sanctuary, felt cavernous and cold. The lights of the city flickered below, but all he could think about were 3 little girls, triplets who had wormed their way into his heart without even trying, and the real possibility that they could be ripped away from the only security they'd known. He stood at the window, jaw tight, hands in his pockets, staring at nothing. The man claiming custody of the girls had no right. Not morally, not ethically. Jason had dug into the system enough to know how often children slipped through the cracks, especially when family members stepped in. On paper it looked noble. But behind the scenes, it could be devastating. He had spent most of his adult life using power to protect assets. Now he needed to use it to protect people. The next morning, Jason called in every favor he was owed. Within hours, he had a team of top-tier family law attorneys assembling in his conference room. There were folders, timelines, statements, and a quiet tension in the air like a storm building. His assistant, Rachel, had never seen him like this. Laser-focused, yes, but with an undercurrent of something raw, something personal. "I want everything airtight," Jason said, his tone low but firm. "I want background checks on this man. I want a report on his employment, financial history, criminal record, everything. If he has so much as a parking ticket, I want to know about it. We're not letting those girls go into a dangerous situation." One of the lawyers looked up. "You understand this could get messy. You're not a relative. You have no legal standing right now." Jason didn't blink. "Then we create standing. I'll foster them myself if I have to." The room went still. "I'm not kidding," he continued. "If the only way to keep them safe is for me to be their guardian, then start the paperwork. Today." A murmur passed through the room. Jason Sterling, notorious for his guarded heart and aversion to personal entanglements, was offering to become a foster parent. But he didn't care how it looked. All he could see were 3 innocent faces who deserved a life better than bouncing between shelters or being placed in the custody of a man who only showed up now that the headlines were trending. He met with Elena that afternoon in the park, where the girls were running barefoot through the grass, chasing bubbles and laughter like it was their job. "I need your permission," Jason said gently, "to be part of this legally. I'm not trying to take your place. I just want to help." Elena blinked, stunned. "You'd do that? For us?" Jason didn't hesitate. "For them, and for you. Because I believe in what you're building, and I won't let anything threaten it." She sat down heavily on the bench beside him. "When my husband died, I made myself a promise that no matter what, I'd keep them safe. But this man, he has a lawyer. He's pushing hard. I'm scared, Jason." He reached over and gently covered her hand with his. "You're not alone anymore." Over the next week, things moved fast. Jason's legal team found enough red flags in the cousin's background to raise serious concern. 2 prior reports of domestic disturbances, a history of unstable employment, and ties to individuals involved in questionable activity. Enough, at least, to give the court pause. But what tipped the scales was something else entirely. A handwritten letter from the girls. It had been Mia's idea. Each girl wrote a part, their words innocent but powerful. "We like living with Mommy. She makes us feel safe. We don't know the man who says he's our cousin. He never came before. We want to stay with Mommy and with Mr. J because he brings us books and reads to us and says we're brave. Jason stood in the back of the courtroom that day, heart pounding as the judge read the letter aloud. Alina sat beside him, her fingers white-knuckled around the edge of the table. The cousin sat at the other end, eyes darting, jaw clenched. The judge looked up. Based on the testimony presented, the report from Child Protective Services, and the wishes of the children, I am ruling to maintain current custody with the mother, Alina Ross, and grant temporary foster guardianship to Mr. Jason Sterling, pending further evaluation. A collective breath filled the courtroom. Jason closed his eyes, the weight of the moment crashing into him. They'd done it. Afterwards, in the hallway outside the courtroom, the girls ran to him as if they had wings. June threw her arms around his waist. Lila tugged at his hand. Mia beamed up at him. "Does this mean you're our real Uncle Jay now?" she asked. Jason crouched down, heart full to bursting. "It means I'll be around. For every birthday, every book, every time you need me. And we get to stay with Mommy too?" Leela asked. He nodded, voice rough. "Always." Elena stood nearby, tears slipping down her cheeks. She mouthed a silent thank you. That night, Jason didn't return to his penthouse. Instead, he helped Elena and the girls settle into a new apartment, one he had quietly arranged, safer and closer to the school where Elena now worked full-time leading the literacy program. He helped build bunk beds, ordered pizza, even let the girls cover his expensive dress shirt in glitter glue as they made family signs for the front door. He didn't care. In fact, he couldn't remember ever being happier. Later, as the girls fell asleep with their heads tangled in a pile of blankets and stuffed animals, Jason sat on the small balcony with Elena, the city stretching out before them in soft lights and silence. "You changed everything," she said softly. Jason shook his head. "They changed me." And for the first time in a long, long while, Jason Sterling felt like a man not just with wealth, but with purpose. Not just successful, but fulfilled. He had gone in to buy a coffee and walked out with a family. Months passed, but Jason never drifted away from the lives of Elena and her girls. What had begun as an impulsive act of kindness had evolved into a quiet, constant rhythm of connection. Family dinners on Sundays, school pickups when Elena worked late, impromptu science experiments on the living room floor that left glitter in his hair and a sense of peace in his chest he never knew he needed. The girls adored him. To them, he wasn't the CEO or Mr. Sterling. He was simply Uncle Jay, the man who made the best grilled cheese, who never got mad when juice spilled, and who always, always listened, really listened, when one of them had something to say. But as life began to settle into something resembling normal, a new challenge rose quietly, like fog creeping in on a clear morning. Jason had been summoned to a board meeting for the Sterling Foundation, the nonprofit arm of his corporation, created years ago for tax purposes more than impact. He had rarely attended the meetings, usually leaving them to senior staff. But this time, his name was called for a vote, one that would determine whether the foundation would cut funding to several underperforming community initiatives, including the very literacy program Elena was now running. He read the proposal twice, then a third time. The justification was logical: low engagement, high costs, minimal return on investment. The type of data that made sense in boardrooms. But all Jason could see were three little girls sitting cross-legged on a rug at the community center, reading Charlotte's Web out loud together. He saw Elena, smiling but tired, pouring her soul into building something from nothing. He saw the kids who came after school, because home wasn't always a safe place. He saw the way they bloomed with a little attention, a little belief. He looked around the boardroom. 12 faces, all well-fed, well-paid, and completely disconnected from the lives they were impacting with their spreadsheets and cost-benefit analyses. Jason stood up before the vote. "Let me tell you a story," he said, adjusting the cuff of his suit out of habit. "About 3 girls I met in a cafe. They were celebrating their birthday with one muffin. One. And when they couldn't afford a cake, they blew out invisible candles and made real wishes. The room was quiet. A few raised eyebrows. No interruptions. I thought I was just buying them dessert. But I was wrong. I was buying a seat at their table. I was being invited, without knowing it, into a world I'd spent decades ignoring. A world where small things matter. A world where literacy isn't just a number on a chart. It's a lifeline." He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. "So when you vote today, don't think about projections. Think about people. Think about what we lose when we reduce lives to data. Think about what we could be doing instead." The vote was postponed. The board was stunned. And for the first time in its history, the Sterling Foundation was restructured to include lived experience advisors, people like Alina, who understood the communities being served. Jason didn't stop there. With his personal funding, he launched an initiative called the Real Start Project, a program aimed at supporting single parents, especially mothers, who were building new lives after hardship. Housing support, job placement, childcare, mental health services, every piece tailored with dignity and empathy. When Jason brought Elena to the ribbon cutting of the first center, named after her late husband, Marcus, she cried quietly, her hand gripping his. "You didn't have to do all this," she whispered. He looked around at the smiling faces, the bustling rooms, the future being shaped one voice at a time. "I did," he said, "because they deserve it. And because I needed to." Back at home, the girls were baking cookies, well, more like covering the kitchen in flour, and Jason walked in just in time to be ambushed with chocolate chips and hugs. "Uncle Jay," Leela squealed. "Did they like your speech?" Jason chuckled, brushing flour off his shirt. "I think they did. But your cookies will win them over for sure." June held up a tray, completely misshapen lumps on it. "We made these special because you're brave." Mia nodded solemnly. "You stand up for people. That's what superheroes do." Jason felt his throat tighten. For a man once so obsessed with success, he now knew this was what it meant to matter. Later that night, he sat in the quiet living room while the girls slept upstairs. Alina curled up next to him on the couch, a blanket over their legs, her head on his shoulder. "You're not who I expected when we met," she said softly. Jason looked down at her, smiling faintly. "I'm not who I expected, either." There was a long silence, but it was the comfortable kind, the kind that only exists between people who've walked through fire and come out stronger. "You think they'll remember all this?" Alina asked, her voice tinged with wonder. Jason didn't have to think. "They'll remember the love, the laughter, the fact that someone believed in them, that they mattered, and that no matter how hard life gets, magic can still find you in a coffee shop on a random morning." Alina reached for his hand, squeezing it. "So can family." He turned toward her, eyes warm. "Yes, especially family." Jason never thought his life would end up like this. He used to define his days by the precision of minutes, his calendar packed edge to edge with meetings, calls, decisions, and transactions. There had been no space for accidents, no tolerance for detours. And yet, a single detour, a coffee shop he hadn't planned on visiting, had turned his world inside out, and strangely, right side up. It had been nearly a year since that day. The seasons had changed. The girls had grown taller. Their laughter was louder now, richer, filled with confidence and ease. And Jason had changed the most. Though few would know it just by looking. He still wore tailored suits, still ran board meetings, still signed off on billion-dollar ventures. But somewhere between bedtime stories and dance recitals, between scraped knees and school art projects, his heart had softened like clay warmed by hands that knew exactly how to reshape it. There were still moments when he'd catch himself, halfway through a corporate call or staring at a new real estate pitch, and he'd blink, reminded of the man he used to be. The man who once measured success only in profit margins. The man who lived in glass towers and rarely looked down. But now he did look down, often, right into three little faces that looked back at him like he was their whole sky. Alina's literacy program had not only survived but bloomed. With Jason's resources and her vision, they'd opened 4 more centers across the city, each one uniquely crafted for the neighborhood it served. They offered more than books. They offered safety, encouragement, second chances. At the most recent center's opening, a teenage boy had stood at the podium, tears in his eyes as he told the crowd how the program had helped him learn to read. Really read, for the first time. He was 17. For years, he'd been hiding behind avoidance, bullying, and shame. But someone saw him, gave him time, taught him slowly, with patience instead of punishment. Jason sat in the front row that day, hands clasped, heart wide open. That speech did something to him. It settled something in his bones. He realized that while the money made the structure, it was people who built the soul. He had always been good at building things. Now he was learning how to fill them with meaning. Back at home, Alina had turned her attention to writing. In the quiet corners of her day, she wrote stories based on real people, real struggles, real triumphs. She said it helped her heal, but Jason could see something else. It helped others feel seen. She was giving a voice to the unheard. One night, after the girls were asleep, Jason came into the kitchen to find her typing on her laptop, eyes focused, a little smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "Are you writing about the muffin story again?" he asked, teasing gently. She looked up and grinned. "Maybe. I've been calling it the day the world changed without warning." Jason laughed, sliding into the chair across from her. "Sounds like a fairy tale." "It kind of is," she said, closing her laptop and leaning forward. "Only it's real." They sat there for a while, the hum of the dishwasher filling the space, the kind of silence that feels like home. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, letting us in. Jason reached across the table, brushed his thumb over her knuckles. "Regret? No, not for a second. If anything, I regret how long it took me to realize what really matters." "You used to be so." She paused, searching for the word. "Terrifying," Jason offered, smirking. She laughed. "I was going to say untouchable. But yes, that too." He leaned back, his smile softening. "You know what I was really? Lonely. I had everything and nothing at the same time. Until you. Until them. There were no grand declarations after that. No need. Their bond was forged in small moments, quiet choices, deep trust. It didn't need fireworks to feel extraordinary. The girls had started calling his place home without asking, and he never corrected them. One night, Mia had a nightmare. Jason heard her soft cry before Alina did, and slipped into the hallway in his pajamas, finding her sitting up, clutching her stuffed bunny. He sat beside her, whispering gently until she calmed down. "Did something scare you?" he asked. She nodded. "I dreamed we had to leave. That everything went away again." Jason wrapped his arms around her, heart breaking just a little. "We're not going anywhere," he whispered into her hair. "You're safe. This, everything you see, this is yours now." And it was true. He'd started the legal process to become their godparent with Alina's blessing. Not because they needed more titles or legalities, but because he wanted it on paper, in stone, in every way possible, that he would never leave them, that they could always count on him. A year to the day after their first meeting, Jason stood once again in front of that tiny cafe. The triplets held his hands, June on the left, Leela on the right, Mia hopping in front with excitement in her step. Alina walked beside them, laughing as she snapped a photo. They stepped inside, greeted by the same waitress who'd served them back then. Her eyes widened as she recognized them. "You all came back," she said, clearly moved. Jason smiled, nodding. Some anniversaries are worth celebrating. They sat at the same table, ordered the biggest cake on the menu, sang the birthday song twice, once for nostalgia, and once just because. And when the candles were lit and the girls blew them out together, Jason closed his eyes too, letting himself make a wish he hadn't needed to say out loud. He already had everything he never knew he wanted. The day had started like any other, just a man in need of caffeine. But it ended with hearts connected across lives that were never supposed to intersect. Sometimes, the universe doesn't ask permission to rewrite your story. Sometimes, it just hands you a muffin, and the rest becomes magic.